The nation of Babylon or Babel, as it was called, began about 3000 BC with Noah and his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, after the great flood. The flood waters had receded and dried up from the earth, and Noah, his family, and all that were in the ark came out and descended from the mountains into the plains, and they became fruitful, as the Lord had commanded them. But they refused to go anywhere else, and dwelt in the plain called Shinar, not desiring to move to any other place on earth. The Lord had commanded them to populate and spread over the whole earth, but there was one, Nimrod, the grandson of Ham, encouraged them to disobey the Lord. He had the people to build him a tower that would reach to heaven. Nimrod established the first government independent of God. Scriptures speak of Nimrod as a mighty one on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, and he also hunted the souls of men. His government gradually turned into tyranny, and he collected men's souls to be dependent on him instead of God. While the people were in the process of building the tower and the city, the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the men were building. Then the Lord said, "The people are as one and they all have one language, and this is what they begin to do, nothing would be withheld from them." So the Lord came down and confused their language, that they were not able to understand one another's speech. Then the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they ceased building the city. The city was called Babel because it was there when the Lord confused the language of all the people. Now, it was Nimrod's mother, Semiramis, who started a Babylonian religion in the city of Shinar. The religion of Babel spread and was carried throughout the whole earth, where the people had dispersed, spread, and settled. She started the mother and son cult, and from the Tower of Babel, it had taken off like a whirlwind around the world, and it still exists even to this very day. Then Nimrod went on to build other cities, and he was known to have started the first Gentile empire. The beginning of his empire was Babel, or Babylon, then he built Erech, then Akkad, and then Calneh, in the land of Shinar. He went from that land to Assyria and built Nineveh, Rehoboth-ir, Calah, and Resen, which was between Nineveh and Calah, that was the principal city. Micah the prophet, had announced judgment of the land of Assyria, and a claim that the land of Nimrod will lay waste. This was the ancient pagan empire he built between the Tigris and Euphrates River in southern Mesopotamia. Babylonians were polytheist. They believed in many gods. In the realm of their religion, the Sumerians, who were the ancient inhabitants of this region, and a people of the land of Shinar to which the Bible refers to in Genesis 10:10, they already had a formal system of worship. Every city had a system of gods, each with a main temple. Their chief gods were Anu, the god of heaven, Enlil, god of the air, and Enki, god of the subterranean ocean. Other gods were Shamash, the sun god, Sin, the moon god, Ishtar, goddess of love and war, and Adad, the storm god. The Babylonians promoted the god Marduk at the city of Babylon, so that he became the chief god of the Babylonian religion that began far back in the time of Nimrod. The Babylonians were sky watchers. They developed astrology by using the first steps in carefully observing and accurately recording the positions of planets and constellations of stars, and they were the first to develop a calendar based on the cycles of the moon. The best preserved structure for their Ishtar goddess was the Ishtar Gate. The ruins still exist today. The walls are decorated with bulls, lions, and some animals that look like dragons, and with each culture, the mother and child cult exhibits all around the world to this very day. The Babylonians, or Chaldeans as they were frequently called, descended from a semi-nomadic tribe that settled near Ur in Mesopotamia in the 3rd millennium BC. During the time of Abraham until the fall of Babylon's first dynasty in 1596 BC, Babylon was a dominant influence in Mesopotamia. The first dynasty was the dynasty of Hammurabi from 1704 to 1662 BC. It was the first dynasty that gave Babylon its greatness. During the following centuries, Babylon was at odds with many of the Near Eastern kings until it became a vassal of the growing Assyrian Empire. The city of Babylon became subject to Assyria when Tiglath-Pileser I became king of Assyria. In the reign of Tiglath-Pileser III, he declared himself king of Babylon from 745 to 727 BC. Trouble began to stir when a Chaldean prince, called Marduk-Apollidan, in 721 BC, sieged control of Babylon. In 704 to 681 BC, Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, attacked Babylon. In 689 BC, Sennacherib destroyed Babylon. Esarhaddon, his successor, when he became king, rebuilt Babylon in 680 to 669 BC. Later, as time went on, Assyrian power began to decline, and Babylon grew stronger. The Medes allied themselves with the Babylonians to overthrow the Assyrian Empire between 612 and 606 BC. This alliance gave rise to the new independent dynasty known as the Neo-Babylonian or Chaldean Empire. This newly formed empire had to deal with repeated uprising. To gain their independence, the Babylonians struggled with the neighboring Assyrians for dominion of the ancient world during much of their history. In early 598 BC, for example, King Jehoiakim, of Judah, stopped paying tribute, provoking the Chaldean army to march on Jerusalem. Treasures were taken, and thousands more were exiled to Babylon. The Chaldean Empire reached its height of power when the Babylonians overpowered the nation of Judah, destroyed Jerusalem, and carried God's people, the leading citizens of the nation of Judah, into captivity about 587 BC. Nebuchadnezzar II, a clever general, ruled from 604 to 562 BC, who at the beginning of his reign, he advanced west and faced the Egyptian army at Carchemish. The Egyptians were trying to bring back to life their collapsed empire, but it was unsuccessful. The Lord had earlier given Jeremiah the prophet a message concerning Egypt's doom. Egypt had been judged by the Lord, therefore, he used the Medes and the Babylonians to move and take over the former Assyrian Empire, thereby giving the Babylonians their independence in 625 BC. Under a leader named Nabopolassar, Babylon's independence was established. Babylon again became a great empire. In 605 BC, Nabopolassar's son, Nebuchadnezzar II, became ruler and reigned for 44 years. It was under his kingship that ancient Babylon attained its greatest splendor, becoming the greatest empire of that era. The new Babylon under King Nebuchadnezzar II, rose on the shore of the Euphrates, and using the treasures which he took from other nations, he rebuilt and reconstructed the capital city of Babylon, so much so that no other ancient city in the world was like it. During the 6th century BC, Babylon had become a huge city. Its walls circled the city with a circumference of 13 miles. Its outer walls were constructed of brick, and about 85 feet thick. Crossing at right angles were major streets, beautifully laid out. He had a huge palace and 5 courtyards, and on his palace grounds he built one of the 7 wonders of the world, the famous Hanging Gardens. Legend says he built it for his homesick wife, who was from Media. He constructed for his god Marduk a temple tower that he built upon a platform approximately 300 square feet. Nebuchadnezzar died in 561 BC. Later, the new state began a rapid decline. In 538 BC, Babylon was captured by the Persians. After Nebuchadnezzar's death, the Chaldean Empire was torn by civil war and threatened by a new rising power, the Persians, an Indo-European people who had settled in the southern plateaus of Assyrian, in today's Iran, and they were sometimes called Aryan. In 556 BC, Nabonidus ascended the Chaldean throne. Although he knew the threat to the Babylonian Empire, he did nothing to keep it from falling. At the very time Cyrus, the Persian king, and his forces were moving west from Assyria, and slowly laying claim to more and more territory, Nabonidus removed himself, went to Tema, and stayed for 10 years deep in the Arabian desert, to establish his mother's religion. He left his son Belshazzar as corregent in Babylon. One night Belshazzar ordered a banquet, and the Persians were just then pressing on Babylon itself. During the night at appointed time in Belshazzar's drunken feast, he saw a hand writing words on the wall. Only hours after Daniel interpreted the message, the city of Babylon fell. Belshazzar was killed in a bloodless battle. Nabonidus, on his way to help save his city, had made it back, but he fled. No one really knows what happened to him. In the year 538 BC, and after 70 years of Judah's captivity, Babylon fell to the Persian Empire. Under Cyrus the Great and his son and successor, Cambyses, the Persians conquered all lands between the Nile in Egypt and the Indus River in India, and Babylon ceased to be the world power. This conquest took 25 years, from 550 to 525 BC. In 539 BC, after conquering Babylon without a battle, he wrote a decree that the Jewish exiles could return to their own countries. Many Jews left Babylon and went home to rebuild Jerusalem. The word that the Lord spoke against Babylon and against the land of the Chaldeans by Jeremiah the prophet, he wrote it down in a book. He wrote down all the evil that would come upon Babylon, all the words written against Babylon. The Lord also gave Jeremiah a prophecy of Babylon's destruction. The Lord promised that Babylon and its idols would be judged. It will come to pass when 70 years are completed, he was going to punish the king of Babylon and that nation, the land of the Chaldeans, for their iniquity. And he was going to make it a perpetual desolation. So I will bring on that land all my words which I have pronounced against it, all that is written in this book, which Jeremiah has prophesied concerning all the nations. It had been declared among the nations, proclaimed, and a standard set up, it was not to be concealed. Babylon is taken, Bel, her God is shamed. Merodach, her God is broken in pieces, Babylon's idols are humiliated, her images are broken in pieces. For out of the north a nation, the Medes and the Persians comes up against her, which will make her land desolate, and no one will dwell therein. They will move, they will depart both man and beast. Therefore, thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I will punish the king of Babylon and his land, as I have punished the king of Assyria. Because you were glad, because you rejoiced, you destroyers of my heritage, because you have grown fat like a heifer threshing grain, and you bellow like bulls, your mother will be deeply ashamed, she who bore you will be ashamed. Behold, the least of the nations will be a wilderness, a dry land, and a desert. Because of the wrath of the Lord, she will not be inhabited, but she will be wholly desolate. Everyone who goes by Babylon will be horrified and hiss at all her plagues. However, I will bring back Israel to his home, and he will feed on Carmel and Bashan, his soul will be satisfied on Mount Ephraim and Gilead. In those days and in that time, says the Lord, the iniquity of Israel will be sought, but there will be none, and the sins of Judah, but they will not be found, for I will pardon those whom I preserve. Behold, I am against you, O most haughty one. Says the Lord God of hosts, for your day has come, the time that I will punish you. The most proud will stumble and fall and no one will raise him up, I will kindle a fire in his cities, and it will devour all around him. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the children of Israel were oppressed, along with the children of Judah, all who took them captive have held them fast, they have refused to let them go. Their Redeemer is strong, the Lord of hosts is his name. He will thoroughly plead their case, that he may give rest to the land, and disquiet the inhabitants of Babylon. A sword is against the Chaldeans, says the Lord, against the inhabitants of Babylon, and against her princes and her wise men. A sword is against the soothsayers, and they will be fools. A sword is against her mighty men, and they will be dismayed. A sword is against their horses, against their chariots, and against all the mixed peoples who are in her midst, and they will become like women. A sword is against her treasures, and they will be robbed. A drought is against her waters, and they will be dried up, for it is the land of carved images, and they are insane with their idols. Behold, a people, the Medes and Persians will come from the north, and a great nation and many kings will be raised up from the ends of the earth. They will hold the bow and the lance, they are cruel, and they will not show mercy. Their voice will roar like the sea, they will ride on horses, set in array, like a man for the battle, against you, O daughter of Babylon. Make the arrows bright. Gather the shields. The Lord has raised up the spirit of the kings of the Medes. For his plan is against Babylon to destroy it, because it is the vengeance of the Lord, the vengeance for his temple. Set up the standard on the walls of Babylon, make the guard strong, set up the watchmen, prepare the ambushes. For the Lord has both devised and done what he spoke against the inhabitants of Babylon. O you who dwell by many waters, abundant in treasures, your end has come, the measure of your covetousness. The Lord of hosts has sworn by himself, surely, I will fill you with men, as with locusts, and they will lift up a shout against you. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, that I will bring judgment on her carved images, and throughout all her land the wounded will groan. Though Babylon was to mount up to heaven, and though she was to fortify the height of her strength, yet from me plunderers would come to her, says the Lord. Behold, I will raise up against Babylon, against those who dwell in Chaldea, a destroying wind, and I will send winnowers to Babylon, who will winnow her and empty her land. Do not spare her young men and utterly destroy all her army. The slain will fall thrust in her streets, for Israel is not forsaken, nor Judah. Now, it had been over 60 years since the last deportation of the Hebrews, namely the elders, the priest, the prophets, and all the people from Jerusalem to Babylon. The king Jeconiah, the queen mother, the eunuchs, the princes of Judah and Jerusalem, the craftsmen and the smiths had all been deported to Babylon. They had built houses to dwell there, and the people increased. The Lord promised his people through the prophet Jeremiah that after 70 years of captivity were completed at Babylon, he would visit them and perform his good word toward them, and they would return to their own land. For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and go and pray to me, and I will listen to you, and you will seek me and find me, when you search for me with all your heart. I will be found by you, says the Lord, and I will bring you back from your captivity. I will gather you from all the nations and from all the places where I have driven you, says the Lord, and I will bring you to the place from which I cause you to be carried away captive. The Lord punished the king of Assyria, who deported the Israelites from Samaria, and took them to Assyria, and now he will punish the king of Babylon, who deported the Jews from Jerusalem to Babylon. He will punish the king of Babylon and his land of the Chaldeans. Although the Babylonians were instruments of God, as were the Assyrians, the Lord used them both to punish his people. However, the Babylonians are cut out for destruction, as were the Assyrians. History says that Belshazzar was king, and the son of Nabonidus, who was the last king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, and ruled from 555 to 559 BC. However, Scriptures names Belshazzar as king and son of Nebuchadnezzar. Belshazzar served as vice-regent while King Nabonidus was in Arabia, for Nabonidus was frequently absent from the capital on building projects. Belshazzar may have been in charge of the kingdom during Nebuchadnezzar's 7-year insanity. Belshazzar was a king given into sensual pleasures. He may have been one to have wild drunken parties. During one of the Babylonian feast days, he made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine in the presence of the 1,000. In reality, in their excitement, the Lord prepared their feasts, and in their drunkenness, he will bring them down like lambs to the slaughter. While Belshazzar tasted the wine, he gave the command to bring the gold and silver vessels, which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple, which had been in Jerusalem, that he and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought the gold vessels that had been taken from the temple of the house of God, which had been in Jerusalem, and the king and his lords, his wives and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine, and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze and iron, and wood and stone. In the same hour, the fingers of a man's hand appeared and wrote opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his hips were loosened, and his knees knocked against each other. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. The king spoke saying to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and tells me its interpretation, will be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck, and he will be the third ruler in the kingdom. Belshazzar had no idea that hours from now would soon be the end of his kingdom. Therefore, all the king's wise men came, but they could not read the writing, or make known to the king its interpretation. Then King Belshazzar was greatly troubled, his countenance was changed, and his lords were astonished. The queen, who may have been the wife of Nabonidus, heard the words of the king and his lords and came to the banquet hall. She spoke saying, O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts trouble you, nor let your countenance change. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the Spirit of the Holy God. In the days of your father, light, and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him, and King Nebuchadnezzar your father the king, made him chief of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. Inasmuch as an excellent spirit, knowledge, understanding, interpreting dreams, solving riddles, and explaining enigmas were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar, now let Daniel be called, and he will give the interpretation. Daniel was brought in before the king. The king spoke and said to Daniel, Are you that Daniel who is one of the captives from Judah, whom my father the king brought from Judah? I have heard of you, that the Spirit of God is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men and the astrologers have been brought in before me that they should read this writing and make known to me its interpretation, but they could not give the interpretation of the thing. And I have heard of you that you can give interpretations and explain enigmas. Now if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you will be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck, and will be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then Daniel answered, and said before the king, Let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another, yet I will read the writing to the king, and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father a kingdom and majesty, glory, and honor. So because of the majesty that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whomever he wished, he executed, whomever he wished, he kept alive, whomever he wished, he put down. However, when his heart was lifted up, and his spirit was hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. Then he was driven from the sons of men, his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men, and appoints over it whomever he chooses. But you his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart although you knew all this. However, you have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. They have brought the vessels of his house before you and your lords, your wives and your concubines have drunk wine from them, and you have praised the gods of silver and gold, bronze and iron, and wood and stone, which do not see or hear or know, and the God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways, you have not glorified. Then the fingers of the hand were sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the inscription that was written, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. This is the interpretation of each word. Mene, God has numbered your kingdom, and finished it. The word Mene is written twice, meaning Belshazzar's kingdom will definitely fall. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances, and found wanting. Paris, your kingdom has been divided, and given to the Medes and Persians. The plural of Paris is Upharsin. Now, in the prophecy of Jeremiah, he forewarned the Jews to prepare to flee the city of Babylon before its impending destruction and return to Jerusalem when they began to hear the rumors of the land. The wall of Babylon will fall. My people go out of the midst of her. And let everyone deliver himself from the fierce anger of the Lord, unless your heart faints, and you fear for the rumor that will be heard in the land. A rumor will come 1 year, and after that, in another year a rumor will come, and violence in the land, ruler against ruler. Therefore, behold, the days are coming that I will bring judgment on the carved images of Babylon, her whole land will be ashamed, and all her slain will fall in her midst. It will be this very night that Babylon will be divided and defeated by the Medes and Persians. The prophecy of Jeremiah will, this night, be fulfilled, and Babylon will be judged. 70 years have been completed and the Lord is about to punish the king of Babylon and that nation, the land of the Chaldeans, for their iniquity. The time has come for the Lord to make Babylon a perpetual desolation. The Lord is about to bring on that land all his words which he have pronounced against it, all that is written in this book, which Jeremiah has prophesied concerning all the nations. In 539 BC, the Babylonian Empire fell to the Persians. The Medes and Persians put themselves in array against Babylon all around. The Persians skillfully developed a plan whereby they would get on the other side of the wall by wading the river to enter under the walls of Babylon without ever being seen. They shot at her and spared no arrows, for Babylon and the land of the Chaldeans had sinned against the Lord. Babylon was given into the next empire, the Medes and Persians' hand, her foundations have fallen, and her walls were thrown down, for it is the vengeance of the Lord. The sword was against the Chaldeans, against the inhabitants of Babylon, against her princes and her wise men. The sword was against the soothsayers, against her mighty men, against their horses, chariots, and against all the mixed peoples who were in her midst, and they became like women. The sword was against her treasures, and they were robbed. A drought was against her waters, and they were dried up, for it was a land of carved images, and they were insane with their idols. The Lord caused the princes, wise men, governors, deputies, and her mighty men to be drunk, and they slept a perpetual sleep and did not wake. The broad walls of Babylon that were meant to be invincible were utterly broken, the high gates were burned with fire, and the people and the nation labored in vain because of the fire, but they were weary. The Lord had punished the king of Assyria, now he is about to punish the king of Babylon and his land of the Chaldeans. The Lord's plan was against Babylon to destroy it because it is the vengeance of the Lord, the vengeance for his temple, for strangers had come into the sanctuaries of the Lord's house. The days have come, and judgment was on Babylon's carved images. It was declared among the nations, it was proclaimed, and a standard set up, that Babylon is taken, Bel, Marduk, their god is shamed, and Merodach, their god is broken in pieces. Babylon's idols are humiliated, her images are broken in pieces, for out of the north the nation of the Medes and Persians has come up against her, and has made her land desolate. Cyrus brought down Babylon, and in 538 BC he will allow the Jews to return to Jerusalem. That very night Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, was slain, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. Darius is called the son of Ahasuerus, of the lineage of the Medes, in Daniel 9, verses 1 and 2. This Darius is not the famous Darius the Great. Darius the Great was Cyrus' successor, not his predecessor. Darius the Mede was 62 years old at the time of the fall of Babylon, and he was born around 601 or 600 BC. But Darius the Great was born much later, around 521 to 486 BC, and he was not a Mede. This Darius was never referred to as a king of the Medes or of Persia. However, Cyrus may have appointed him a subordinate king to rule over Babylon in 539 BC. He is simply known as the ruler of Babylon. In the Persian texts, a certain official named Darius the Mede was Gubaru, which may have been his personal name. Gubaru is mentioned in cuneiform documents and the Nabonidus chronicles. He took over immediately in Babylon until Cyrus appointed his own son Cambyses as co-ruler around 538 BC. In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the lineage of the Medes, who was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, Daniel understood by the books the number of the years specified by the word of the Lord through Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. The 70 years has been accomplished, and now the Jewish people will return to their own land. If this video has been a blessing to you, please, like, subscribe, and share. Thanks.